Woke, moderators locked out, chaos in the chat. Dress ain't needed in this bizarre habitat. Cigarette ash falling, Maggie's in the lid. Quirky tunes and laughter, planting every seed. Channel turned to madhouse, naked folks abound. Rapture animate, lifting souls off the ground. Was it real, was it just? Leaning in the haze, dreaming wild escapades, lost in smoky craze. Maggie's take over, electrified the scene. Naked in the bushes, or just a funky dream. Rapture in the air, moderators be damned. Maggie center stage commands, high demand. Techno fails and whispers, virtual distress. Everybody naked, feeling overdressed. Leanie snaps awake, cigarette half spent. Maggie's take over, a fantastical event. Channel run amok, viewers shedding clothes. Digital rapture in the twilight it glows. Was it real, was it just? Leanie in the haze, dreaming wild escapades, lost in smoky craze. Maggie's take over, electrified the scene. Naked in the bushes, or just a funky dream. Rapture in the air, moderators be damned. Maggie center stage commands, high demand. Techno fails and whispers, virtual distress. Everybody naked, feeling overdressed. Leanie snaps awake, cigarette half spent. Maggie's take over, a fantastical event. Channel run amok, viewers shedding clothes. Digital rapture in the twilight it glows. Was it real, was it just? Leanie in the haze, dreaming wild escapades, lost in smoky craze. Maggie's take over, electrified the scene. Naked in the bushes, or just a funky dream.
Lizzo. I wasn't sure anyone could hear me. Good evening, everybody. Lizzo. Alex scared the shit out of me then. Yeah, you thought Maggie had been on the ciggies all day. 40 Benson and Edges. Yeah, she can hear me. Happy days. Yeah, someone decided to start this and then go to lav again because, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why she can't just go to lav and then start this. But yeah, she's been on live all day. Oh, Pink Fan, you've got no idea. Wait till she tells you what's going on, what she's got to tell you. Oh, you won't believe it. Right, I think she's in a chair. I'm going to hand it over. So I will bid you all good evening and enjoy yourselves.
Hello, hello. Wait till I tell you. Hang on, I've got to clean my glasses. I can't see a thing. Thought they were funny after today when the rain started. So, I did a live today, Lizzo, okay? Just practicing on my phone, doing a live outside. I took my son somewhere, and while he was there, I sat on the street in the car and went live, me and Jessie. So it was not uninteresting. And just near the end, Pink, do you remember hearing all the shouting? I did, Lizzo, I did. I did it twice. Do you remember hearing all the shouting, Pink? That's okay, I'm off to the lab in 10 minutes, lol. Go on, run now, Liz. So, gets off, just goes to pull out in the car, Pink. The next thing, all these lads and girls are running everywhere. I heard that, all this screaming. I went, I don't want to get the phone. All the police was all pulled up in the middle of the road, all the sirens on. Couldn't get my phone, gets on, right. And I went live again. Sab was, remember Sab? Sab's workshop, he come in. These other lads I were talking to. And I was going to everyone, can you sub up, please? And hit the like. And you know what? The one I was on with yous didn't work. It's still there saying Hendon or something. The other ones worked, but it's not showing on Lena's YouTube. It says something about she's got to change the settings or something for people to see it. So once she does that, you'll be able to go in and watch the kickoff. Just missed it right at the beginning as all the police come down, and then they all turned in the middle of the road and shot up the other way. So they got one of the fellas at one end and they got another at the other end. So this lad come over, I went, hey lad, what happened? And the lad come over, he's on. I said, look, you're on YouTube. I said, you're on a live. I said, but I'm not showing your face. And he was telling us what was happening. Do you know what? It happened so quick. Honest to God, all my glasses were steamed up. I only wear them for reading, but they were all steamed up and soaked with the rain. I've only just cleaned the raindrops off them now. Oh God. Yeah, it was private. Oh, so she's going to have to source it on her side. Hello, Ewan. How are you? Ewan, you missed all the kickoff today. You missed all the kickoff. I was live in Bootle. How are you doing, Ewan, anyway? Where's Lunchy? Is she still there? Is she there? No, she's not. Is there only you, Pink, and Lizzo? I thought I seen Lunch Lady. Could have swore I did. Sure, my eyes to see. Oh, did you tell me Lunch Lady was on, Alec? Oh, he's got his headphones on now. We'll have to do give us the clue, when we're talking, like sign language. I'm waving them now. Did you say Lunch Lady was on? I can't see where she is. Not here now. Do you know where she's gone? Yeah, she was, wasn't she? I did see her. Oh, she might have run for the pee. But yes, they were all kicked off. I was going, oh my God, where's Lunch Lady? It was literally less than 5 minutes after I ended the live with yous. Oh, it's time for you to see it. Oh, there she is. Lunchy, I've sent you 2 songs. See if you like them. The first one's a real old one. My mum used to sing it. So, You'll have to have a listen to them mother and son songs. Who was driving? We're always in here pocket, aren't we? So shall I crack on anyway and get this finished so you girls can do what it is you've got to do? Are you going to be listening, Lunchy? Okay. So I can't remember when I haven't stopped on a chapter. I went past. Hang on. So I don't know where we were. Space Vincent, I hang on. Yeah, so she was wanting to know about these fellas who've been in the area of the night that Madeleine was abducted. The one that was jumping in the beds with the kids and he was molesting them. Hang on. Okay. Oh, don't worry, Owen. Well, listen, I'm going to be reading now. I don't think you're going to be interested. I've been reading these girls, the Madeleine McCann story. It's the old book, the first one that Kate wrote. In fact, I think it was the only book she done. Owen, I've never been told I've got a sweet voice before, only by the Americans. Everyone else is sick of listening to me. But anyway, if you want to listen to this sweet voice, pull a chair up, lads, get a cover and sit and listen because I'm going to read the rest of the story now. So I'm going to go from here. I'm sorry if you've heard this bit. In spite of some of the terrible discoveries I was making as I learned more of the stories and statistics relating to missing and exploited children, it wasn't all bad news. Gradually, my outlook was growing more positive, and I was beginning to get past my early certainty that Madeleine must have been taken by a paedophile and murdered. I was coming to realise that that didn't have to be the answer. Meeting Ernie Allen and the people at NCMEC played a big part and helped me along this road. Jerry and I flew to Washington, D.C. to visit the NCMEC at the end of March. Ever since his first trip there, Jerry had been keen for me to go too and see for myself the work they were doing. It didn't take me long to understand why. Ernie's support was not only encouraging, it was based on solid facts and figures. In the States, research shows that around 56% of children abducted by strangers are recovered alive. Don't let people tell you that there is no hope, he said. There are a host of scenarios under which this child could be alive. You have to keep battling for her. We felt even more convinced that Madeleine was out there somewhere, and if such a thing was possible, our determination to find her was even greater. Everybody at the centre was fantastic, warm, helpful, and upbeat. The Americans can do approach to life. Let's focus on solutions, not problems. Makes anything seems possible, or at least absolutely worth trying. Such optimism and energy go a long way towards motivating people. Oh, it looks like I'm going to be tongue-tied tonight. They certainly motivated Jerry and me. The obstacles to the implementation of Amber Alert type across the Europe suddenly seem more surmountable than they had in recent weeks. The future was brighter. The following day, we were able to see Jeff Sedgwick, then Assistant Attorney General and National Amber Alert Coordinator. While in Washington, we were also fortunate to have the opportunity to meet Ed Smart, the father of Elizabeth Smart, who was abducted from her bedroom in Salt Lake City in the early hours of the 5th of June 2002, age 14. Oh my God, how can that even happen? She was found alive 9 months later, less than 20 miles away from her home with her abductors. Ed was lovely. We talked about the role and success of Amber Alerts and the need for a similar system in Europe. He emphasised how important it was to keep Madeleine's face in the public conscious. Later, We talked about Elizabeth and the difficulties the family had faced amongst the joy and their reunion. It was a very emotional morning. Just over a year after chatting to her dad, we got to meet Elizabeth herself. She had been in London and came up to Rotley to spend a Saturday afternoon with the four of us. When I went to meet her at the railway station, I was excited but a little nervous. What would she be like? What would we talk about? I wasn't even sure I'd recognise her. The only pictures I'd seen were of a younger Elizabeth. I needn't have worried. I spotted her straight away and found her warm, kind, intelligent, and humorous. Over lunch, we talked about many things, including her life now and the forthcoming trial of her abductors. Sean and Amalie even persuaded her to join them for a painting session. What perhaps stood out most to us was how amazingly well adjusted Elizabeth is, a real survivor, body and soul. I hope with all my heart that the same is true to our Madeleine. On the 10th of April 2008, we went back to Brussels, this time to the European Parliament, to present our declaration to the MEPs and petition them to help establish with a coordinated CRA. For the declaration to be formally adopted, over 50% of the 785 MEPs would need to sign it. The media presence at the press conference that followed was impressive. We were told there hadn't been such a turnout since Prince Charles, and the delight had been such a turnout. Lama and appeared at the Parliament. It was a good sign, we thought, for the future of children all over Europe. Our day, though, was to finish with a nasty twist. You'll recall that back in October, we had supplied the Portuguese public prosecutor with a list of people from whom we felt statements should have been taken. In response, the Portuguese police had decided to come to Leicester to be present while the British police interviewed Fiona, Dave, Russ, Jane, Matt, Rachel, and Diane, as well as many other individuals whose testimony had never been sought. The questions to be asked were those Jerry and I suggested to the prosecutor, obvious and pertinent ones, I hasten to add, with a few additions from the police. It just so happens when the police trip to the UK coincided with our visit to Brussels. While we were finishing lunch, Clarence had a phone call from a Spanish journalist who told him that he'd been given what appeared to be witness statements made by Jerry and me to the Portuguese police. The part of my statement in which he was interested was Madeleine's comment to us on the morning of the day she disappeared. Why didn't you come when Sean and I cried last night? I don't think I need to remind anyone how I've been tortured by this question since the moment Madeleine was taken from us. My reason for having shared it with the police was plain. It was potentially highly significant. As Clarence relayed his conversation with the journalist, I could feel my anger and frustration building. Not again. How many of these leaks would we have to bear before this whole nightmare was over? Needless to say, before long, Clarence was besieged by calls from the media, all of them asking about this breaking story. We could see what was going to happen. The news of our efforts in Brussels would be spiked and replaced by Madeleine's Left Alone to Cry, or whatever attention-grabbing headline took the fancy of the sub-editors. I don't remember many occasions when I've been angry, especially as I was that day. The Portuguese police, both these currently and are previously involved in the inquiry, had our statements for 11 and a half months. Now, if this information comes to release, completely illegally, I may add, at the risk of sounding like a cracked record, today of all days when Jerry and I were in Brussels trying to do something positive for child protection, the effect it would have was obvious. It would discredit Jerry and me, detract from what we were trying to help to achieve. We were gutted. If you think I'm being paranoid, think on this. In a meeting 7 weeks ago, after Madeleine was taken, Guillermo in Scarcio had tried to reassure us that the police We're not trying to portray us in a negative light. If they really wanted to do that, he said, we'd release the comments Madeleine made to you on the day she disappeared. Bingo. As we feared that day's McCann story changed and the media ran with the leaks from our statements. We were determined not to let our frustration at this injustice get to us. On our return from Brussels, we started to lobby all of the 785 MEPs, urging them to sign the declaration. Just adding your name to a bit of paper sounds so easy, but it does require the signatory to make the time and effort to attend the official signing in person. We are all afflicted by apathy at times, and that goes for politicians too, maybe even more than for the rest of us. And so we pushed along with friends, family, and supporters. The charity Missing Children Europe, Catherine Mayer, and the 5 MEPs who had sponsored our declaration, making the journey to the European Parliament in Strasbourg that June to give the campaign and the MEPs one final nudge. By September, we'd achieved our goal. We have 418 MEPs' names on our declaration, and it was formally adopted as a resolution by the European Parliament. We were relieved and delighted. We knew that this was no more than one small step in achieving our aim, but it had been a shot in the arm of the frustratingly slow bureaucratic process and brought child abduction to the forefront of the minds of those who were actually able to do something about it. Let's hope it stays there. At 1 a.m. on Wednesday, the 27th of February 2008, Jerry and I were woken suddenly from our sleep. The room appeared to be shaken, and a photograph of Madeleine toppled over off my chest of drawers. We were terrified. Our immediate thought was that somebody was trying to kill us. Maybe a bomb had gone off, or perhaps a gang was trying to break into our house. Jerry got out of bed and went to check on Sean and Molly. Before having a good look around inside and out, I prayed for our safety. With the occasional death threat turning up in our morning mail, it is perhaps not surprising that our first instinct was to think we were being attacked. When we began to calm down, we realized that in all probability, it had been an earth tremor. I started to cry, and we hugged each other, fear and then relief giving way to a deep sadness of what our life had become. As we waited for the Portuguese judicial procedure to run its course, we felt completely out on a limb. Since August, when the police had begun to turn against us, we had been very disappointed with the attitude of the British authorities. Contact with us reduced to a trickle, and a little, if any, information was shared with us. After we were made Guidos, the situation deteriorated further. The UK police would argue that their hands were tied. The Portuguese might have perceived any interference as an attempt to undermine their primacy in the investigation, which would have had implications not only for the current inquiry, but also for any future international cooperation. We were aware of the frustrating constraints of this delicate relationship, but to us it just felt like a betrayal. The most difficult things for us has been that we know the British police considered aspects of the investigation to be substandard, and we honestly don't think they believed we were involved in Madeleine's disappearance. Comments made to us privately by several officers, including the most senior ones, confirmed this, but did nothing to prevent us from feeling we'd been hung out to dry when radio silence was maintained in the public. It is exasperating too that while we know the UK police are well aware of the selective leaks to the media and what they seem designed to achieve, they still insist they have a cooperation relationship with the police. These leaks have concluded confidential statements taken by officers in Britain and supplied to the Portuguese police, and in some cases the breaching of that confidence has caused immense damage to people other than ourselves. It all makes this cooperation look very one-sided by declining to speak out about this kind of behaviour, which wouldn't be tolerated in our country. They are conveying the impression of a tacit acceptance of it, even agreement with it. In the spring of 2008, almost a year after Madeleine was last seen, the police decided they wanted to conduct a reenactment in Praia de Lou of the night of the 3rd of May 2007. The participants required were Jerry, me, Fiona, Dave, Jane, Russ, Russell, Matt, and Diane, and Jess Wilkins, to whom Jerry chatted in the street too that night, just after his glimpse of Madeleine. They were interested in they weren't interested in using actors or stand-ins, so either everyone agreed or the reconstruction wouldn't go ahead. Our understanding was that as our Guidos, Jerry and I were obliged to attend. The other witnesses received reasonably friendly emails from the police via the British police inviting them to take part. They were a bit baffled and replied requesting more details about the purpose of this belated reenactment. It seemed it would not be filmed, or at any rate not for information gathering through the public broadcast. Our friends had watched with increasing horror what had happened to us. If they were suspicious that the police might be trying to use them to somehow strengthen a flimsy case against us, or even to implicate one of them, it would be understandable. There were there were worries too about the likelihood of a media forfeit blowing up around the whole thing, especially as the proposed date had already been leaked to the newspapers. The biggest concern, though, of all, for all the witnesses approached, was how a reenactment of the kind the police were proposing could actually help to find Madeleine. This question remained unanswered. At the point, the tone of the correspondence grew more brusque, and what had seemed to be a request began to sound more like a summons. Some people decided they wanted to take legal advice before agreeing to anything. In the end, there was no quorum, and the plan was abandoned. Meanwhile, the distressing landmarks kept coming. In May, we faced the unthinkable, the first anniversary of Madeleine's abduction. In the preceding days, we gave a plethora of media interviews, and on the 30th of April, an ITV documentary in which we participated was screened. Our aim was to relaunch the search for our daughter by appealing to the public directly for as much information as possible about her disappearance, including reports that had already been made to the authorities. As the UK police were simply passing on all leads they received to the police without sharing anything with us or our dependent investigators, which sadly remains the case today. There were huge gaps in the puzzle we were desperate to fill. A dedicated phone line had been set up for this purpose, which people could call anonymously and confidentially. As for the day itself, the prospect was so awful we didn't know what we would want to do. My inclination was just to stay quietly in the house with Jerry, Sean, and Amali. Jerry, on the other hand, felt the need to be with other people. Johnny, Trish, Sandy, and Michael were going to represent us in Praia de Lou at a service of hope for Madeleine in the little church. At home, there was to be a service in Rothley at the parish of St Mary and St John, and a Mass at Our Lady of Annunciation in Liverpool, where Jerry and I were married. In the end, we attended both. Afterwards, I was glad we did. It was a day for private anguish, but probably not one which we should have been on our own. We asked all those who wished to remember Madeleine and missing children everywhere to light a candle and say a prayer at 9:15 p.m. All over Britain and beyond, candles and lanterns were lit, torches shone heavenwards. NFC illuminated the night sky with their floodlights, and Chinese lanterns were released into Rothley. The Archbishop of York, Dr. John Sentamu, wrote a special prayer for Madeleine and urged everyone to reduce their efforts to pray for his safe return. 9th of May. Sean and Emily have been a huge source of comfort to me. I have no idea how I would carry on if it wasn't for them. How parents who have lost an only child continue, I don't know. Shawnee is a big soft mummy's boy, which is nice. He's very gentle and generally just lovely. And Mally is a real character, but so sensitive and in tune. She often says how much she likes you, Madeline, my sister, and what she's going to give you of hers when you come back. I heard her saying a prayer for you today too. Monday, the 12th of May, 2008, was Madeline's 5th birthday. If I'd known on her 4th birthday that she wouldn't be back with us for this one either, I'm sure I'd have gone under. There is something to be said for living one day at a time. As we've continued to do so since, we had a tea party at home with balloons, cake, cards and presents, attended by family and friends and Madeline's best buddy Sophia, whose birthday she shares. The presents go into Madeline's room to await her return. Her pink bedroom remains exactly as it was when she left, but it's a lot busier now. There are gifts people have sent, from teddy bears to rosary beads, and photographs and pictures Sean and Emily have drawn for her, pinned on the walls also. She also has a keepsake box in which the twins leave little things for her. The last sweet in their packet, a new drawing, sometimes just a leaf that they see on their way out. Just take anything that takes their fancy. Everyone sits there from time to time to feel close to her. The children sometimes borrow toys to play with for a while, but they always return it for Madeline. The months of May, as well as Christmas time, always sees a surge of mail. There were periods in the first year that we had to go to the post office day after day to collect several crates of letters. The volume we had received over the past 4 years is absolutely staggering, and we still get a bundle almost every day. Thank God for the friends and relatives who helped us with it. We sort the post into boxes labelled information for follow up. Well wishers, psychics, doses, visions, nasty and nutty. The well wishers box is always by far the fullest, I'm glad to say. The nasty pile has never been huge, and it's rare nowadays for that box to be needed. The nonsensical letters designed for nutty box, though, have arrived fairly constantly. We have seen the best and the worst of mankind in our postbag, as well as in our lives in general. Although we have experienced behaviour and attitudes so offensive and cruel that we would never have believed they existed, the goodness that lies within the vast majority of people has shone through it all. The swell of solidarity from the general public in the immediate aftermath of Madeline's abduction was beyond anything that we could have ever imagined. Back in the UK, our parents too kept afloat by a big cushion of love and support. I believe it saved all of us from the abyss. When Jerry and I were made Guidos and castigated daily in the media, many people, not surprisingly, didn't know what to think. A section of public opinion, especially in Portugal, certainly turned against us. Although outside Portugal, this was contingent but was not a bit as big as the media suggested. We continued to receive hundreds of letters every week, most of them reassuring and plenty of them criticising the press and expressing their abhorrence of the conduct of the authorities towards us. So, although many doors have been slammed in our faces, we never felt we were entirely on our own. From children, we've had praise. They've composed themselves of pictures they've drawn for Madeline. We've had handwritten letters from people in their 80s and 90s, which have touched us deeply. I feel honoured that these elderly people, with their wisdom and long experience of life, have taken the time to share their thoughts and good wishes with us. Mums have written, dads have written, people from all walks of life, from all around the world. Before our lives changed in the way they did, I don't think I'd have ever considered writing to somebody I didn't know in an hour of need. Having discovered how uplifting the encouraging words of a stranger can be, I have done this myself now on several occasions. In the early days, people sent or bought teddy bears to Rothley, which friends tied in their hundreds to the railings around the war memorial in the middle of the village. They stayed there for weeks and weeks in the sun, wind, and rain, all waiting for Madeleine to return. As autumn faded and still she wasn't home, my aunt removed them, and parents from British Ellis and Rothley Primary School kindly took them home, washed and dried them. The regional director of the charity Samaritans Peace Operation Christmas Child then arranged for the toys to be taken over to orphans in Belarus in time for Christmas. We were sent a little stack of photographs of these gorgeous children receiving Madeleine's bears. The joy on their faces at having a single teddy of their own brought us to tears. Unbeknown to us at the time, shortly after Madeleine went missing, a group called Helping to Find Madeleine was formed, made us primarily of working mums and a few dads from around the world who badly wanted to help. I was completely bowled over when I heard about everything they were doing for our campaign. Such commitment and effort from complete strangers takes my breath away. And yes, there have been so many people like this, supporters who print and distribute posters, organise cake sales to raise money for the fund, produce handmade books full of lovely messages and prayers, and send the most thoughtful gifts for Madeleine. We've had people put money for the funds in our hands on trains, in car parks, in the supermarket, cabbies who tell us to donate our fare. Such warmth and compassion is another trigger for tears. And Mally and Sean began to learn about happy tears at a very early stage of their lives, and they look like a little less puzzled these days when faced with a mother who is smiling and crying at the same time. Are they happy tears, mummy? They ask anxiously. Yes, sweetheart. Oh, okay then. Gestures of solidarity never fail to lift our spirits and our hearts. Take the lorry driver who recognised us in a traffic jam on the M6 one day. He pulled up alongside us, tooted his horn, showed us his Madeleine wristband through the window, and gave us fingers crossed sign. He probably didn't have the first idea how much that meant to us. This grassroots support firmly underpins the highest profile help we have been so fortunate to receive from those in a possession to bring funds and influence to our search for Madeleine. We cannot begin to express our thanks to the wealthy and successful people who have come to our aid and showed the courage to stand by us when the many others ran a mile. Just because someone has with what's that word? With oh, I don't even know that. Just because someone has I don't wait, I'm sure this is wrong. Wherewithal, I've never heard that. Just because someone has the wherewithal to help financially or publicise our cause, it doesn't mean they are obliged to do so, and they could very easily have chosen not to. We know, for example, that friends and business associates of Brian Kennedy tried to discourage him from getting involved with us, just in case, but neither his generosity and passion for his faith and trust in us have ever faltered. The involvement of some of our well known backers have been criticised. Why is one child receiving all this attention and support when there are so many others needing help? Why? Well, these people are human beings and their hearts have been touched. Most of them are parents and grandparents themselves. They care about children and they have been shocked by how Jerry and I have been treated. We are just immensely grateful for any assistance we receive, no matter who gives it, no matter what it entails, no matter how big or small. It all helps. It helps Madeleine. So for everybody, there are 1,000 goodies, probably many more. And then there are those that it's impossible to be sure about. The folk who correspondence goes into the nutty box. We must assume that most people of these letters, though not necessarily all of them, are sent by people suffering from mental illness. And I don't want to make light of their problems. Indeed, it is concerning if our mail is anything to go by how many vulnerable individuals there seems to be out there with psychiatric conditions that remain either undiagnosed or inadequately treated. Mental illness is a difficult thing to understand. It's not like a broken leg or blocked artery where the condition and solution are obvious. Jerry and I have had a little personal and professional experience of it. And during 6 months I worked in psychiatry, I found it heartbreaking as well as quite fascinating to see someone you know as a warm, interesting, intelligent person. So when well and stable admitted to the wards in an uninhibited distance and dishevelled state. It's very upsetting, and I can only begin to imagine how difficult it must be for partners, families, and of course for the patients themselves, who must be so frightened and frustrated. Over the last 4 years, we have been contacted by various people evidently afflicted by conditions such as schizophrenia and bipolar disease, manic depression. Some of them appear to have become fixated on Madeleine and her place. Paranoid delusions, delusions of reference, when random events convey a special meaning to the sufferer, and racing thoughts, where the mind uncontrollably brings up random thoughts and switches between them rapidly. Whether or not they are related to each other, they have come into play. All of these symptoms can be extremely sad, disabling, and potentially dangerous for the person experiencing them. Within days of Madeleine's disappearance, several people with major psychiatric problems made their way over to Praia de Lu and somehow managed to get to see Jerry and me. In spite of the state we were in, we found it hard to ignore anybody who was trying to help, even if they were telling us complete nonsense. Some of them were very persistent. They would track us down again and again, wielding their piles of paper full of potentially illogical facts, figures, and symbols. It was draining and at times a little scary. On our return to the UK, we had a number of such callers turn up at our doorstep, along with assorted psychics and visionaries. Sometimes I would open the door and immediately wish I hadn't. The behaviour of a psychiatric patient can be unpredictable, and with Sean and Amali following me every time I answered the doorbell, I felt very vulnerable and anxious. One day, Jerry, in what I can only assume was a moment of weakness, let the self appointed Lord's helper into the house. He was a tall, elderly gentleman, sporting a wooden crucifix the size of canvas around his neck, the size of Kansas around his neck. I stared at Jerry in disbelief and soon decided it would be wise to take Sean and Emily out to the park. Thankfully, the Lord's helper proved to be totally harmless, even if he was not on the same planet as us that day. Jerry and I were, I suppose, fortunate to have been surrounded all our lives by good and loving people who had a good outlook on life and respect for others, was similar to our own. But maybe this background only magnified our shock when we were first faced with the small but vivacious group who wished us ill. We had never come across people like this before, and it was perhaps, oh God, where's the mic? Sorry, I had to move my headset and it moved the mic. We had never came across people like this before, and perhaps the fact that they are so rare that amplifies their voices, but their words and actions are generally less comprehensible than those of the psychiatric cases. When criticism surfaced shortly after Madeleine was taken, it was hard to bear. Nobody likes to be criticised, but this was kicking us when we were down. Then the criticism began to turn nasty. We received letters spitting venom like, your daughter will be getting tortured and it's all because of you. Or your daughter's 6 feet under, shame on you. And those were the restrained ones. Other letter writers took a warped pleasure, it seemed, in going into lurid details, which I couldn't bring myself to repeat on here, about what might have been happening to Madeleine because of you. Having to cope with this on top of our raw pain almost pushed us over the edge. We simply couldn't understand why anyone would want to inflict more agony on us. These people were actually taking the trouble to sit down and write this filth, to spend money on a stamp and take their poison pen letters to the postbox. Did this make them feel better? Needless to say, after Jerry and I were declared our Guidos, the abuse escalated. We had mail delivered to our house addressed to child killer Kate McCann and the lying bastards. The internet has provided individuals like this with a largely unregulated opportunity to set up websites and forums and blogs where they can share their bile and hate with other faceless, anonymous lowlife, all locked away in their bedrooms, talking to each other online. In the early days, this upset me tremendously, but gradually I grew a protective shell. I learned to ignore it and then to pity these people, to have so little compassion or understanding and so much malice in your heart must surely make you one hell of an unhappy soul. And the capacity to devote so much time to a hate campaign, for some it seems to be practically a full-time occupation, speaks of an empty and friendless life. Thankfully, these sad specimens are not as numerous as they might appear to be. Many of them post messages on websites under a host of different names in an attempt to make the anti-McCann lobby look greater than it is. As well as those who prefer to hide behind the computer screens, there are the publicly seekers, like the one group set up by a man who has had the gall to use our daughter's name in the title of his nasty little organisation. He and his cohorts prey on vulnerable families who have experienced tragedy. We are not the first to be targeted, sadly. We probably won't be the last. In practice, this bunch have been more of a nuisance than anything else. The only time their activities have seriously distressed me was when they leafleted our village just before Sean and Amali were due to start primary school. Early that evening, a local lady knocked on our door, quite upset. She handed me the offensive pamphlet that had been pushed through the letterbox. Apparently, this had been delivered to all houses in Rothley except ours and handed out in the village during the day. My visitor told me she was disgusted by it. She didn't want she hadn't wanted to worry me by bringing it up, but she just couldn't bear to know about the injustice. The incident grieved me more than I would have expected. Up to this point, this man's activities had always been confined to the internet and therefore presumably to be like-minded individuals. Now he was spreading them in the community, and worse still, in our community. I knew most of the villagers were behind us, but there was always the possibility that a few people might be influenced, and I feared that any unpleasant gossip might poison the atmosphere of the twins' new school, and create problems for them at this crucial time. How could someone do this to our two 4-year-olds? I did log a complaint with the Leicestershire police, but it seems to be the case with so many of these things, there was apparently little they could do. So we took legal action against him, and as a result of which he undertook not to repeat his allegations and was obliged to pay the court fee of £400. It hasn't made a great deal of difference. He is still going around insinuating that we were involved in Madeleine's disappearance. Only now he is just being slightly more careful about how he says it. Others have caused us distress, misdirected our investigation, and wasted our time and funds by falsely claiming to know where Madeleine is. Although we have trained ourselves not to get our hopes up, there will always be the tiny voice in your head saying, maybe this time. But these days, when this information amounts to nothing or is exposed as a hoax attempt, the emotional swings and the final crash are less severe than they used to be. Hoaxes of one kind or another have to run into the hundreds, probably thousands now. Some of these people are just after publicity, others have sought for money. Although, by and large, the police are adept at dealing with these kinds of crime, it still hinders our search. In deciding whether to promote the rewards on offer for Madeleine's safe return, we have always had to weigh the inherent risk of attracting greedy criminals against the possibility of laying out of the woodwork somebody who really knows something. We now take the view that anyone with genuine information will be aware of the rewards. If they want it, I'm sure they'll find a way of getting in touch. It has been far more upsetting and damaging, frankly, to find ourselves let down by people in positions of trust, the very people we ought to be acting in Madeleine's best interests. Unfortunately, there have been a very few of them. Another revelation that appalled us was the existence of the individuals whose lives seem to be governed by how they can turn any situation to their own advantage. If their personal agenda is not their prime focus, it is never far behind. They might even be helping or at least seeming to help, but all the time they are calculating what's in it for them. There are journalists and criminologists I could name whose interest in Madeleine has far less to do with recovering an abducted child than with the profiting from her misfortune. They continue to offer their services and expertise to promote themselves and make money, often muddying the waters in the process. You wonder what drives some of these people. The need to feel important, or perhaps something lacking in their lives. Perhaps they are just consumed by a sense of worthlessness and hatred. Maybe some human beings are just born that way. Thank God for the nice, quiet majority, as they often describe themselves. Although they have been quiet to us. They have helped to keep our faith in humanity alive and confirmed to me and my innocent pre-May 2007 view of the world was not so wide of the mark. Most human beings are inherently good. As the summer of 2008 approached, the investigation into Madeleine's abduction remained classified, and Jerry and I remained as weirdos. It was like trying to lead our lives in purgatory. At some point, who knew when, the police were going to have their hands in evidence to the prosecutor for examination, and he would decide whether to file charges against us under the police to continue the investigation or archive the case, which would mean it would stay on file, but all active inquiries would cease. In the meantime, fueled by the customary leaks, speculation in the press about what would happen when rumbled on. At the end of June, Jerry and I made the difficult decision to take a break. It did not feel right at all to go on holiday without Madeleine, but 14 unbelievably harrowing and stressful months had passed since she was taken, and we were running on empty. We owed it to Sean and Emily, and we owed it to Madeleine to be physically and mentally fit to go on looking for her. We needed peace and quiet, and to be far away as we could from the clamour in Europe. We were opted to go and visit Auntie Nora in Vancouver. Clarence told the press firmly that the timing and destination would not be disclosed. Canada was the perfect choice. We all spent 5 days of our holiday in a cabin on a remote lake in rural British Columbia. It was an idyllic place surrounded by forest, tranquil and unspoiled, with nobody there but us, and possibly a few bears and moose. Of course, they were tough moments. The solitude emphasized the yawning gap in our family, but that is with us always, wherever we go. Sean and Amali absolutely loved their adventure, and it was wonderful for Jerry and me to be able to spend so much time together with the children. Perhaps it was too much to expect our trip to remain completely secret, because one night back in Vancouver, Jerry was woken by a phone call from a DC Johnson of the Leicestershire Police wanting to fax us some information. Jerry told him that we didn't have access to a fax machine and suggested emailing us at the usual address. DC Johnson said it wasn't that important. He could drop it off when we were back, and asked when we were leaving. Jerry told him, and we went back asleep. Mysteriously, on our arrival at Vancouver Airport on the 10th of July for our flight home, we found a reporter and a photographer waiting for us. There were 4 more in Heathrow. When Jerry phoned Leicestershire Police to speak to DC Johnson, they were puzzled. They said they had no information for us, knew nothing about the phone call, and had no DC Johnson working for them. Stitched up again. Still, at least the newspapers got their photographs. While we were away, there was a hearing in the High Court relating to an application we had made on Madeleine's behalf for access to all the information held by Leicestershire Police relating to their case. As nobody else was now searching for her, we wanted our own investigators to have the chance to check the material for any relative leads. Naively, I thought a court order would be seen by the police, who were always telling us their hands were tied, as a way of helping us without upsetting their Portuguese counterparts. If they were required by law to pass us this information, surely the police need to accept that. I couldn't have been more wrong. The UK authorities fought our application tooth and nail. I was shocked by the force of their opposition and the lengths to which they seemed prepared to go to deny us this access in these circumstances. The British police had their reasons, of course, among them the investigative, oh my God, I can say it in my brain, but I can't say it out loud. Among them, the investigative, whatever, primarily they were obliged to concede to the Portuguese and the concern that being in possession of misinformation otherwise known only to the police and the perpetrator might compromise Jerry and me, since at this point we were still Aguidos. All of this the Assistant Chief Constable for Leicestershire made clear in a statement written for the court. He had come out to Portugal shortly after Madeleine's abduction and had seen us at our most grief-stricken, and yet he felt able to comment of Jerry and me in this statement. While one or both of them may be innocent, there is no clear evidence that eliminates them from involvement in Madeleine's disappearance. We were completely staggered. No evidence to eliminate us. Whether or not it was his intention, that line stuck in our heads as guilty until proven innocent. Given the extreme opposition we faced, we realised there was a battle that we weren't going to win. Reluctantly, we made a tactical decision to accept a smaller amount of information. Having to withdraw was quite galling, especially as the 81 item disclosed to us included trivial detail that our family had passed on to the police in the first place. Meanwhile, in Portugal, Gonçalo Amaro removed as coordinator of the investigation in October 2007, reared his head again. On the 30th of June, he retired from the police force altogether. His reason for doing so was, he said, to regain his freedom of speech. 9 months after his removal from the investigation, Aminal's association, which appeared to have increased remarkably as speculation about the closure of the case mounted, he, along with several of his ex-police friends, began to appear in newspapers and on television. His purpose appeared to be to convince the Portuguese nation that Madeleine was dead. He had, he said, written a book about the case that would be published very soon. On Monday, the 21st of July, the Portuguese Attorney General Office announced that the investigation of Madeleine's disappearance was to be archived pending further evidence. The case files were to be released, and the Arguido status of Jerry, myself, and Robert Muras was to be lifted. There was no evidence to suggest that Madeleine had come to serious harm, and no evidence to implicate Jerry, me, or Robert Muras in what had happened to her. Jerry and I received no official notification of this from the Portuguese authorities. I heard the news at about 4:30 from a French news agency via Sky News and BBC News 24. It did not come as a great surprise, as both the day of the announcement and its contents had been preempted by the newspapers on Friday. We had been tripping over photographers and news crews at the ends of our roads all day. It may sound odd, but in some ways we were glad the investigation had been closed. As I have said, we were far from convinced that there was any real investigation taking place anyway. So to have it officially brought to an end didn't feel like as a big loss as it might have been expected. While the police had continued to supply usual response, the official investigation continues. All credible lines of inquiry will be pursued. We've been receiving messages from concerned people who have tried to pass on information to the police only to be told the child is dead. Now that this investigation has concluded, reports could be channeled directly. Investigation had concluded reports could be channeled directly to our own team, which would give them, we hoped, more to go on. It was certainly better than nothing. As for the dropping of our Guido status, it was hardly a cause for celebration. All it meant was that after 11 months of being pillared, where we were back where we started, Madeleine was still missing, and we still had to find it all the same. It was a relief, of course, in spite of my disgust with the whole business. I could appreciate that not being an Aguida was preferable to being an Aguida that Jerry and I were in a better position than we had been the day before. It was also a public acknowledgement that the Portuguese authorities had nothing to implicate us in Madeleine's disappearance, just as we always insisted, and we hope that some of the doors that had been closed to us since September 2007 would now reopen. With the inquiry closed, our Portuguese lawyers Carlos Pinto Diabro and Rogério Alves were allowed to consult the case files and wasted no time in doing so. Although the DVD containing the files took 10 days to reach them, given that leaks had become such an epidemic by this time, it was to astonish nobody to learn that the prosecutor's 57-page summary of the police's final report had been on a Portuguese website since the day after the news broke. Amaral and his chums had evidently been poised to take full advantage of the long-awaited lifting of the judicial secrecy. Now they really went to town. We had staged a kidnap, or Madeleine had died in our holiday apartment, and we had hidden her body. We had influenced the British police and organised our campaign to mislead investigators into searching for a living child, and so on and so on. No longer gagged by the law, Amaral was talking more and more openly to journalists and turning up on television chat shows. A friend in the Algarve kept us updated on his activities. It was unpleasant and distressing to hear what he was saying, but we had to know what Madeleine was up against in Portugal, and it was incessant. With the best will in the world, it is hard for anyone to absorb this stuff day in and day out and remain completely objective, especially when it's never challenged or balanced by an alternative viewpoint. It is impossible to convey, particularly to people outside Portugal who were not aware of Amaral's behaviour, just how difficult this smear campaign was both to withstand and to counter, and we desperately needed to counter it. We had always believed that the information that can lead us to our daughter is likely to come from Portugal. This is where the crime was committed after all. Blackening our names was one thing, but if people there were taken in by Amaral's theories, they were going to rethink that was no point in looking for Madeleine or in passing on any information that might be relative. We are quite sure that Amaral's posturing has reduced our chance of finding her. Why on earth would a former police officer want to convince the world that a missing child was dead? With no evidence whatsoever to support his claim, he's probably in on it. The only conclusion we could draw was that he was attempting to justify his actions while in charge of the investigation, and at the same time promoting his forthcoming book to cash in on our misfortune. It just beggars belief. I spent many days in tears sobbing at the injustice being done to Madeleine by the very people who should have been helping her. There were times when I felt so incensed by the conduct of Amarals and his friends, I thought I simply couldn't get through the pain or anger. It was utterly frustrating that there didn't seem to be anybody in Portugal prepared to stand up against this man. Surely they were intelligent and knowledgeable people in positions of authority who could see through these offensive allegations. Why were they all staying quiet? Was it because it wasn't their problem? Were they scared to speak out? Perhaps Amaral has tapped into some kind of national subconscious desire for this to all just go away. The country was already reeling from a child abuse scandal involving Cassiopeia, a state-run institution for orphans and other disadvantaged children. When this finally came to court in 2010, 6 men, including a TV presenter and a former UNSCO ambassador, would be convicted. See what I mean? See what I mean? They're all in on it. The first such case ever to be tried in Portugal. Perhaps it was more convenient and less troubling to lay Madeleine's disappearance at the door of her foreign parents, put an end to the matter and move on. Who knows? On the 24th of July 2008, 3 days after the inquiry was closed, Gonzalo Amaral launched the book about our daughter's disappearance. For this to have been possible, confidential information relating to the investigation would have had to be passed to the publishers and any number of people involved in the production of the book well in advance of the lifting of judicial secrecy. Needless to say, it repeated its theories, dressed up the fabrication and speculation. What it failed to intend was any evidence. Something one could expect rather important to a police officer, or any detail that didn't suit his story. Dear God, I'm finding it really difficult to believe you're there at the moment. The more our suffering and pain continues, and the more we are tested, the more I find myself doubting your presence, which is really scary. Without you, we have nothing, certainly nothing more than a slight chance. So is it almost possible to give up on you? Please, God, if you can bring Madeleine back immediately, please give us a sign, something positive. Jerry and I talked about taking legal action against Gonzalo Amaral, but we have concerns about the time and efforts this would involve. We did not want to be divisive from our own investigation, just as we had put the restrictions on the case behind us, and we feared that any resolution through the Portuguese courts would take too long. For the moment, we hoped the fuss would die down and Amaral would let up. While struggling to cope with all this, I had a task of Herculean proportions facing me, combing through the 5,000 or so pages of documents contained in the case files that had been presented to the prosecutor and received by our lawyers on the 31st of July. We were pleasantly surprised by the prosecutor's conclusions and by how emphatic he was about the lack of any evidence to suggest either that Madeleine was dead or that we were involved in her disappearance. For several months, we've been concerned that if the case was closed, it might be closed in a way that left a dark cloud of suspicion hanging over us. So this came as a huge relief. Initially, though, I was a little skeptical as to how much the police files were likely to be to us, bearing in mind that latterly, at least, the principal focus of their inquiry seemed to have been Jerry and me. 4 days later, the files were released to the media. DVDs containing our names, dates of birth, addresses, phone numbers, passport details, and those of our friends, relations, Mark Warner staff, witnesses, and potential suspects were being dished out to any journalist who asked for a copy. All those months we'd spent begging for scraps of information about what might have befallen our daughter, and now here was the whole lot being distributed to every Tom, Dick, and Harry. This is a big difference between what is in the public interest and what is of interest to the public. And surely, when it comes to the dissemination of official police records, it is the former that should prevail. It meant we had to seek advice on preventing identity theft and other fraud. Naturally, the media were going to be scouring the files for juicy stories. Without a thought for the consequences for people who had tried to help the investigation, now potentially valuable witnesses who had spoken to the police in confidence would be losing their anonymity. Jerry and I knew only too well the enormous strain this imposes on such victims and their families. Few people are equipped to deal with it. It has been our intention to go through the files with our investigation team and extract any information relevant to furthering our search. But now, with the media devouring it and rushing out to be to be its key witnesses, many others would be frightened off. It was crazy, and yet another blow to our chances of finding Madeleine. We were splashed all over the papers once again. Of course, the tone swinging from the negative, the dogs, Kate refusing to answer questions, to the more supportive criticism of the police for overplaying the DNA evidence. But exposure of a few of the injustices perpetrated on Jerry and me didn't outweigh the damage done. In the meantime, I set to work on the files. Scrutinizing them would in the end take up to 6 months of my life, and it would be a painful as well as a time-consuming labour. The 5,000 odd pages were divided into volumes, which seemed very disjointed. Usually, the information was presented chronologically rather than separated accordingly to subject matters. As a result, pieces of data relating to a certain line of inquiry or suspect were scattered throughout the files in different sections. The majority of the material was in Portuguese, so one of our first jobs was to find a company to translate it into English. Ultimately, the entire file would be translated at a cost to Madeleine's fund of almost 100,000. But initially, Jerry and I spent hours scouring through it to prioritise the sections we wanted more urgently. Then I began on the few sections that were in English, primarily stating moments from the British witnesses or information forwarded to the police by the Leicestershire Police. August 9th. Feeling a bit unsettled and agitated this evening. Going through the files brings back the emotions, desperation, and uncertainty at the sad time. I have a slight flicker of hope that maybe something will emerge soon, but I'm just too scared to go there. Inevitably, I spent a great deal of time bringing together bits of related data in order to get a clearer picture of what they actually represented, but I waded through the documents doggedly. It was essential that I did. I don't believe anybody else would have examined them in such microscopic detail or with the same determination or motivation as Jerry and I. How could they? They were not Madeleine's parents. One of the most concerning and upsetting pieces of information to emerge quite early was the records of sexual crimes against children in the Algarve. The discovery made me feel physically sick. I read of 5 cases of British children on holiday being sexually abused in their beds while their parents slept in another room. In 3 further incidents, children encountered an intruder in their bedrooms who were presumably disturbed before he had the chance to carry out an assault. I guess these were the reports that Bill Henderson, the British consul at the time of Madeleine's abduction, had told me about. These incidents had occurred within an hour's drive of Praia da Lua over the 3 years prior to Madeleine's disappearance. The police had never mentioned any of them to us. In fact, I gathered from the files some of them hadn't even been reported by the authorities at the time they were reported. Evidently, they were not considered to be actual crimes, so they might never have come to light if the parents of these children hadn't been brave enough to come forward to the British police after Madeleine was taken and relive their nightmares. They did so in the belief that there could be a link between what had happened to their children and what had happened to her. It broke my heart to read the terrible accounts of these devastated parents and their experiences of their poor children. Unbelievably, or maybe not, by this time, there was a familiar thread running through them all. The parents had called the police. They hadn't felt the crime was taken seriously by the police or by the tour operators. Statements were often not taken. DNA and fingerprint evidence was frequently not sought. In most instances, there was no sign of a break-in. I cried for hours after reading a letter of complaint from one mother to the GNR regarding the sexual abuse of her daughter and the lack of proper attention paid to it by the authorities. The final line in particular has haunted me ever since. It is difficult to see, with this lack of investigation or interest, how a profile of this man can be built up. It did not appear to us that there was any great incentive or determination to find the offender and bring him to justice. Furthermore, it could all be well worse. Indeed, this man could go on to do much worse to another child if he's not stopped now. 6 months later, our beloved Madeleine was grabbed from her bed. Of course, none of these children was abducted, and these crimes may be completely unrelated to what happened to Madeleine. We do not know who has taken our daughter and for what purpose. What these cases do demonstrate, however, is that British tourists in holiday accommodation were being targeted. At the very least, the possibility of a link between these incidents and Madeleine's disappearance should have been investigated. It is so hard not to scream from the rooftops about how these crimes appear to have been brushed under the carpet. The authorities have known of them for a long time, and yet the perpetrators, as far as the families are aware, remain free. But we can't shout about them. Children are involved and they need to be protected. We are extremely grateful, however, to the parents for having the courage and compassion to share their experiences with us to try and help find our daughter. These atrocious offences occur all around the world, and of course, not just in Portugal. But if individual countries do not acknowledge and deal with them thoroughly, they will multiply. Unless these criminals are tracked down and punished and measures are put in place to stop them, not only will they continue to offend, but others will flock to see what they see as an easier milieu for their activities, either to take advantage of weaker laws and laxer attitudes. Combing through the files, I despaired. It was only now that I became aware of just how cursory some of the police work had been. Vital questions had not been asked, albeit not verified lines of inquiry left dangling or at best not adequately documented. There is no doubt that the police were overwhelmed both by having to deal with a crime of this nature under such scrutiny and by the sheer volume of information pouring in. The systems and the resources they needed simply weren't there. I felt some sympathy with them over the challenges they faced, and it was clear that Paulo Rebello, who replaced Gonzalo Amaral as coordinator of the investigation, had tried to make up for some of the initial adequacies by checking back for anything that had been overlooked. But the discovery of each missed opportunity was another twist of the knife in my chest. It was here I found the receptionist's note in the Ocean Club staff message book explaining that we wanted to book the tapas restaurant for the rest of the week because we were leaving our children alone in our apartments. I was dismayed. This was a glaring green right to a child taker, and yet no mention is made of it in the files until December 2007. December 2007, 7 months after Madeleine's abduction. I could only conclude that its relevance had not been appreciated by the police. Door-to-door inquiries appeared to have been delayed, and Hazard, if anything, was at home. Too bad, as far as I could tell. They didn't get a second visit. Many of the witness statements looked extremely vague and brief, crying out for what seemed bindingly obvious and essential questions to be asked and answered. Those made by the Ocean Club staff in particular were very sketchy, even allowing for the fact that almost 130 employees were interviewed in the space of just a few days. We had discovered since that there were staff who were not interviewed at all. Night after night, I read of depraved individuals, British paedophiles, Portuguese paedophiles, Spanish, Dutch, and German paedophiles, and all of the horrific crimes they committed. The police went to visit some of them, looked around their apartments, and recorded merely no sign of the minor. Was that enough to eliminate these vile characters from the inquiry? If more had been done, there was certainly nothing in the files about it. No description, no photographs, no alibis, no DNA, just no sign of the minor. 27th of August, a late night. Depressing reading so many child molesters. Dear God, please don't let this have been what's happened to Madeleine. Please, God. It's difficult not to criticize, and I know I'm a bit of a perfectionist, but honest to God, when your child has been stolen, surely you are entitled to expect more than this, much more. It was unsettling to realize from some of the statements in the files how people can be completely wrong in their recall, opinions, and feelings, and yet so utterly convinced that they are right that what they tell themselves becomes hardened in their minds as fact. A member of staff based at the Millennium Restaurant, for example, stated how she saw us there every morning having breakfast with the children. She described in detail was a nice family we were and what a lovely relationship we had at Madeleine. Very kind of her to say so, but we weren't there. We had breakfast in the Millennium Restaurant only once on our first morning in Priordale Loo, along with all our friends as well. As I read, these statements have become slightly less baffling to me that Robert Murat and the witnesses who said they saw him on the night Madeleine was taken could also be certain of their conflicting recollections. One of the reasons I was so staggered when we were made at Guido's was that I knew there was nothing to implicate us, and yet now I was finding testimonies from witnesses claiming they had seen us in places where we hadn't been or doing things we'd never done. Some of these inaccurate reports weren't particularly harmful, but others could have been. On top of these facts and notes have been taken of various suspicions. Not surprisingly, all of these accounts seem to have been given after we were declared Guidos. Once we were presumed to be complicit in Madeleine's fate, people apparently began to remember actions or events that might have supported the theory. One witness reported having seen Jerry in Lagos on the 7th of May on his mobile phone, saying to somebody, "Don't hurt Madeleine." At the time, we were both in Priordale Loo, surrounded by media and police and embassy officials, as of course Jerry's phone records show. Working through each volume and appendix, I made notes and produced a summary of each section, outlining areas where I felt further digging was needed and commenting on whether or not I felt this was achievable given the limitations imposed on our independent investigators. At regular intervals, Jerry and I met up with Brian Kennedy to discuss progress and set ourselves action points. Despite my initial skepticism of the likely usefulness of the files and my frustration and despair at what I was finding there, having access to all this information did help us with our own search. For a start, it provided us with the names and contact details of potential witnesses we would otherwise have known nothing about. It gave us something to work with to move our own investigation forward. It was good to have confirmation that none of the local searches, in particular the properly planned and executed search finally carried out in August 2007, had turned up any evidence to support the theory that Madeleine had been killed and her body dumped nearby. We'd been told very early on that the majority of child sex offenders who kill their victims dispose of the body within a few kilometres of the abduction site. This fact, together with the absence of any sign of Madeleine in the vicinity of Priordale Loo, increased the chances that she has been removed from the area and in many ways gave us more hope that she was alive. Hang on, I'm just going to have a drink. Oh, if the sound was okay, girls, I should have asked a long time ago, really, shouldn't I? Ooh, what time is it on? Still waiting for an answer with the headphones on. Al, what time is it? Okay. I go by the time I get a stage when we get to 10 o'clock, I know that's enough then. That's enough reading. I get to that every night. No, just wondering. Are you awakening? Good to see you, love. How you going, Pink? How you going, Liz? Who's here? Just the three of yous. God bless yous. Oh, RC's been in. Hello, dear. Don't know if he's. Oh, he's listening. Oh, that's good. Oh, I'm messing my words up terrible tonight. Getting worse tongue-tied. So there's RC's listening. Crazy Hillbilly was there. He'll have gone now, I think. Matchmaker Maggie is reading. No panel tonight. That's it. No panel tonight. Let's see. How's everyone? Oh, I'm trying to bone again, Pink. Lizzo. Leanie must have gone a cape. She fell asleep. She hasn't been in, has she? She must be asleep. She mustn't have slept early. Oh, God, it was time for that cuppa. Oh, here he is. Hello, dear. You okay, RC? You've been listening? Been bullsing the words up, haven't I? Bullsing them up. Where was I up to then? Oh, we are. We haven't read this one, so maybe that's why. Oh. Yeah, gave us more hope that she was alive. Gonna carry on, RC? You ready, love? Get your feet up. Cheers, Liz. Thanks very much. Thanks, Pin. Thanks. Thanks, love. Right, it was only through having the police files that we learned of several key sightings of a suspicious individual or individuals near our apartment in the days and hours around Madeleine's abduction. As chilling as some of the accounts were to read, I appreciated that knowing about them gave us the opportunity at least to develop the leads. In addition to the man and child seen by Jane Tanner at about 9:15 p.m. on the evening Madeleine was taken, and the similar sighting 45 minutes later by the family from Ireland, there were 6 reports from 4 independent witnesses of a suspicious male noticed around the Ocean Club. He was described either as watching our apartment or generally acting oddly or both. Details of 8 sightings are given at the end of this book. Corresponding artist sketches can be found in the illustrations. I wish I could show you the pictures. I will. I'll take some and show you. I'll upload them. The police did not appear to feel that Jane's sightings in Rua de Agostino da Silva and the man and child reported by the Irish holidaymakers in Rua da Escola Primera were related. They seem to have concluded that these were in all likelihood, 2 different men carrying 2 different children. If they implied that these 2 men actually existed at all, the only reason for their skepticism appeared to be an unexplained time lapse between the 2 sightings. They didn't dovetail perfectly. To me, the similarities seem far more significant than any discrepancy in timing. Every time I read these independent statements in the files, and neither could have been influenced by the other. Remember, Jane's description had not been released to the public before the Irish witnesses made their statements. I am staggered by how alike they are, almost identical in parts. As a lawyer once said to me, apropos another matter, 1 coincidence, 2 coincidence, maybe they're still coincidences. Any more than that, and it stops being a coincidence. Who knows why there was a 45-minute gap between the 2 sightings, or where this man might have been in between. I long ago stopped trying to come up with the answers because I don't think I need to. If the child was Madeleine, and in 4 years, no father has ever come forward to say it was him and his daughter. Why would we assume he would be behaving normally or logically? This is nothing normal about stealing a little girl from her bed, so why should his subsequent actions be predictable? The abductor would hardly have been expecting to see Jane walking towards him as he escaped, let alone have anticipated that Jerry would be standing talking around the corner. Whatever plan was in his mind, he might as well been forced by these near misses to change pretty quickly. Naturally, I was interested to see what evidence the police files contained against the first Guido, Robert Muras. I was aware of our friend's accounts of having seen him near our apartment on 3rd of May at Lewis Nebb's Guillermina's in a Corso. Oh God, had of course fed us negative information about him for almost 2 months. But our own bitter experience of the police's way of working had taught me that I need to take that with a pinch of salt. I tried to clear my mind of all these possible influences and remained as objective as possible as I explored the files in more depth. I read Murat's statements and the statements of others concerning him. I read the transcripts of his phone calls intercepted by the police. I recognized details we had been told. I even found the Casanova newspaper clipping the police had described to us, but I could see now that the police had put their own spin on these two present them as suspicious. Is in much the same way as they had cited Bridget's Bible as an indication that I had something to hide. I came across nothing that could be classified as hard evidence against Murat. As was to be expected, for the most part, the latter volumes of the files were devoted to Jerry and me. I still despair at the lengths to which certain elements of the police were prepared to go to try to unearth some sort of evidence to use against us. On the night Madeleine went missing, Russell, anxious to get poster produced and out there quickly, asked me for my camera so that he could use the photographs of Madeleine stored on it. The police appeared to have been determined to prove we brought these posters on holiday with us from Britain. They sent them to a forensic lab for analysis, asking for information on how old they were and how they had been printed and cut. Having established that Kodak paper had been used, they contacted a Kodak representative to find out where the paper could have been bought. I was so exasperated to read all this. There was a much easier, more obvious way of confirming how and where these posters were produced. They could have just asked, as if it took them until April 2008 to verify that the posters had been run off on the night of abduction by Amy Turney, the Mark Warner duty manager, using her own Kodak paper and her own Kodak printer. We knew the police didn't have any evidence against us, of course. If they had, we'd have been in jail. We certainly wouldn't have been allowed to leave the country. This was confirmed by the reports in the police files from the Mark Harrison, the British MPIA expert, Martin Grime, the Blood and Cadaver dog handler, and John Lowe from the Forensic Science Service in Birmingham. Mark Harrison, on the results produced by the sniffer dogs, concluded it must be stated that any such indications without physical evidence to support them cannot have any evidential value to being unconfirmed indications. Additionally, I cannot no inference can be drawn as to whether a human cadaver has previously been in any location without other supporting physical evidence. Martin Grime, no evidential or intelligence reliability can be made from these alerts unless it can be confirmed with corroborating evidence. The dog alert indications must be corroborated to establish their findings as evidence. John Low copy number, LCN DNA profiling is highly sensitive. It is not possible to attribute a DNA profile to a particular body fluid. In other words, it is not possible to determine whether DNA has originated from sputum or blood on the matter of the DNA sample retrieved from our hire car, Mr. Lowe continued. A complex LCN DNA result, which appeared to have originated from at least 3 people, was obtained, but there could be up to 5 contributors. There are 37 components in total. Madeleine's DNA profile is made up of 19 different components. The individual components in Madeleine's profile are not unique to her. It is the specific combination of 19 components that make her profile unique above all others. Elements of Madeleine's profile are also present within the profiles of many of the scientists here in Birmingham, myself included. It's important to stress that 50% of Madeleine's profile will be shared with each parent. It is not possible in a mixture of more than 2 people, as we, the specimen from the car, to determine or evaluate which specific DNA components pair with each other. Namely, we cannot separate the components out into 3 individual DNA profiles. In my opinion, therefore, this result is too complex for meaningful interpretation inclusion. As I stated earlier, even if Madeleine's DNA had been identified in any of the samples from the apartment or the car, there were perfectly legitimate reasons for it to have been there. As it was, her DNA was not identified in any of these samples. The test results were all described by the scientists as incomplete or too complex for meaningful interpretation, and still, all those stories about Madeleine's blood and 100% DNA matches were deliberately fed to the media and thence to the world. All of this information is being given to the police before. They interrogated us in September 2007, yet they chose to ignore it and declared us Guidos regardless. Stuck page. The weekend of the 13th and 14th of September 2008 was not one of our best. On the Saturday, I was bothered by a persistent caller, dubbed by Sean and Amali the man with the poorly head, who initially erratic behaviour ultimately became terrifying when he jumped over the fence at our back garden and tried to get in the house through the patio windows. His last act before being carted off by the local constabulary was to throw one of my large ceramic plant pots through the window screen of my cousin Anne-Marie's car, which was parked on our drive. As if this wasn't enough for one weekend, on my way back from church the next day, I received a text from one of the staff at the children's nursery sympathising with me about the appearance of entries from my diary in the paper and hoping I was okay. My diary? What? Welcome to our world. She was right. Transcripts from my diary for May to July 2007 had been splashed across 5 pages of the news of the world, and I'd known nothing whatsoever about it. The familiar heavy sensation in my chest returned, and I started to cry. Surely they couldn't do this. The coverage was presented in a sympathetic way. In fact, some friends and family assumed the diary had been published with my blessing, but that was hardly the point. Anyone with any decency understands that a diary is private and very personal to whoever wrote it. And as everyone knew, May to July 2007 had been an extremely traumatic period for me. It didn't take me long to figure out what had happened. After taking away my journals in August 2007, the police had them translated into Portuguese. To my horror, back in July, concepts had already been published in a pro-Amaral newspaper in Portugal just 3 days after the launch of the former officer's offensive book. Now the version had been sold or given to the News of the World and translated back into English. I knew only too well from my interviews with the police how words and meanings could get lost in translation, and it was obvious that this is what was occurring here. I was really upset and become had I was really upset, had become I was fed up. I never felt that I never felt so relaxed and so on. Most of it, though, consisted of my thoughts and messages from my heart to Madeleine. I felt as though I'd been mentally raped. 2 days later, I discovered from the police files that on the 27th of June 2008, an investigating Judge Pedro Frias, had ordered the destruction of all copies of my diary on the basis that it was not of interest to the investigation. It was a personal document, and its use would be a violation of the person to whom it belonged. Why then had this order not been complied with, and who had given this material to the media? We had a pretty good idea. 17th of September 2008. I felt like climbing into a hole and staying there. Sometimes it just feels like we are getting tested beyond all limits. Yet again, I've been feeling today the only way this can stop, justice prevail, and all be well again, is if Madeleine is returned to us. I am clinging to the new hope that the good God I have always believed in exists, and that somehow and at some point he will bring Madeleine back to us. After several unpleasant days of phone calls between the lawyers, the News of the World agreed to make financial restitution. Sadly, there was no other way I could be compensated. The damage had been done. It was especially disappointing given that there was the paper that I put together and promoted the reward package back in May 2007. But we had to seek redress to a deterrent. Unfortunately, there would seem too many newspaper editors view this as an occupational hazard. Towards the end of October, I contacted Ernie Allen in the US to ask if the NCMEC team could be willing to produce an age-progressed image of Madeleine. It was clear that a lot of people were still picturing her as a child of not quite 4. It was hardly surprising considering Jerry and I found it difficult ourselves not to cling to the Madeleine we knew. Despite the fact that almost a year and a half had gone by, we were still receiving photographs of blonde toddlers from concerned members of the public asking, could this be Madeleine? We needed to remind everyone that the little girl we were looking for had grown. A forensic named Glenn, who was very patient and understanding, took on the task of producing an image of Madeleine as she might look at 6, which was the age she would be by the time her portrait had been finalised and released. He worked with photographs and sophisticated computer software, even seeking advice from a forensic anthropologist to achieve as close a likeliness as possible. The first picture of Madeleine, age 6, arrived without warning via an email in mid-December. I was devastated. Caught unawares, I could not stop crying. It just wasn't how I imagined her and how she would look. It brought home to me how much time had passed and smacked me in the face with the cruel realization that I didn't actually know what my little girl was like anymore. As it turns out, this wasn't the finished article, just a rough draft. I dried my eyes, and over the coming weeks, with the help of many more photographs of Madeleine, pictures of Jerry and myself at the same age, and a lot of feedback and suggested amendments from me, we arrived at an acceptable or close enough resemblance. I was anxious about appearing to be too critical, but Glenn was at the pains to reassure me that my comments were vital to him. I was the expert, he told me. The viewing public was very forgiving, and the human brain has an amazing ability to fill in the blanks. As artists, we can feel quite disappointed when a recovered child doesn't quite resemble our age-progressed image, she said. But what we think matters little. It's what the witness thinks that matters most. The image is an investigative tool, not a true likeness. And in the end, it isn't important how faithful it is as to the real child, as long as it achieves its aim. When I look at the final picture of Madeleine, age 6, I still really can't see it as our Madeleine. This little girl looks a bit too American, and though she is pretty, if I'm really honest, I think Madeleine is prettier. Maternal bias again. As 2008 drew to a close, Gonçalo Amaral was still parading his unsavoury theories around Portugal and beyond. By the autumn, it had become clear that he was not going to go away. We were beginning to realise that the harm being done to our search for Madeleine, especially in Portugal, was outweighing our reluctance to be distracted from it. We needed to put a stop to this serious damage. We had already spoken to our legal team on several occasions about taking action and knew that the only way of assessing our chances of success would be to seek advice from a Portuguese libel lawyer. We have first talked on the phone to Isabel Duarte on 28th of November. She was very understanding and sounded nice. By this point, we felt as though we had been condemned by an entire country. So to receive sympathy from someone in Portugal was like stepping into a welcoming warm bath. 6 weeks later, Jerry went to Lisbon to meet her, although we were still resisting the temptation to sue. Her passing shot, her passing shot left a lasting impression on him. Don't forget that man said you buried your daughter on the beach. On Monday, the 7th of April 2009, we discovered that a pro-Amaral article had appeared in Publicio, one of the most respectable newspapers in Portugal. Since it had in the main steered cleared of Madeleine's story and was well regarded by the country's opinion formers, this was a worrying development. By coincidence that weekend, Jerry and a couple of our holiday friends had been at Praia de Leu, where significant events and sightings potentially related to Madeleine's disappearance were being reconstructed using actors and filmed for a Channel 4 documentary we were working on at last. No, we were working on at last a reenactment people would see. I stayed at home with Sean and Amali. There was no need for me to put myself through this. I desperately wanted to return to the village when the time was right. But when we did but we but we did not feel we could go there as a couple until we could do so safely and quietly without our visit turning into a media fest and causing more disruption. As it was, the press suddenly forgetting that the world was in economic crisis were claiming that disgruntled workers blamed us for redundancies at the Ocean Club and the downturn in the local economy in general, and made much of a Jerry being heckled in Praia de Leu. In fact, maybe two people, a good-sized crowd shouting something at him, those holding pictures of Madeleine, which they pressed to their hearts to show their support, didn't warrant a mention. For his next trick, Amaral produced a documentary based on his book, which was screened in Portugal on the 13th of April. A friend in Lou, who phoned to tell us about it the next day, was very upset, describing it as awful. I've always been considered quite a gentle person, but these attacks stirred up terrible emotions in me. It was as if my whole body was trying to scream, but a tightly screwed on lid was preventing the scream from escaping. Instead, I was just howling internally. My punch bag certainly came in handy at times. Amaral's documentary was the last straw. On the 20th of April, we took the decision with Isabel Duarte to sue him. While she did the preparatory work, we were off to the States again to appear on Oprah Winfrey's talk show. We had been asked if we considered being interviewed by Oprah not long after Madeleine was abducted, but we'd had a lot on our plates then, and there was no particular objective it would have served. This time, we had our age-progressed image to publicise, and the global reach of Oprah's massively popular show will give us a fantastic opportunity to stamp this on the worldwide public consciousness. It wasn't until we arrived in Chicago that it really hit me what a huge deal this interview was for our search for Madeleine. Oprah has more than once been described as the most influential woman in the world. Certainly, when she spoke, as they say, across the Atlantic, America listens. I was overcome by nerves. Getting ready for the interview on the day was an event in itself. A choice of clothes and shoes had been brought to our hotel for me. Later that morning, we were taken over to the Harpo Studios and introduced to Opera's team. I had my makeup done and hair by two lovely ladies. If only I could look like that every day. Just before we were due to go on, Oprah dropped in to see us. She came across as smart, strong, and warm, and I completely in awe of her. While she wanted to show it what we as a family had to endure, her main intention, she said, was to sympathise that Madeleine was nearly 6 and still missing and alive. We were so grateful. We wanted to hug her. In fact, I'm sure we did. The show was recorded live in front of a studio audience. My nervousness intensified, partly because of the enormity of it, and partly because I knew how important this was for Madeleine. I was emotional too, especially when I looked at the screen and the set displaying rolling images of Madeleine smiling back at us. Opera was as good as her word. She did not dwell too long on human interest topics, concentrating instead on areas she knew would promote our search. And of course, we launched the age progress picture of Madeleine, which, thanks to the team at NCMEC and to Oprah, would not otherwise been seen by millions. On Madeleine's 6th birthday, the 12th of May, 2009, I met Isabel Duarte for the first time. I'd been reluctant to spend this emotional day in a meeting, but our options were limited, and as Jerry pointed out, maybe this was exactly what we ought to be doing on Madeleine's birthday. I was very impressed by Isabel. She was a pocket dynamo, tiny and attractive, but immensely feisty and strong, intelligent and compassionate. You could see the desire for justice burning brightly in her. Isabel suggested that first of all we should apply for an injunction against Amaril's book and the DVD of his documentary with the aim of preventing the distribution and further repetition of his damaging theories. The next phase would be to sue Amaral for libel. It was an inspiring meeting, and I will never forget Isabel's words to me as she leaned across the table, looking me straight in the eye. Today is a very important day for your daughter. Later that same month, Amaral was given an 18-month suspended prison sentence in connection with a case in which 3 of his officers were accused of torture. The mother of an uncle of another missing child. What did I say before? Didn't I say? They're all in on it, I'm telling you. They're all in on it. The mother and uncle of another missing child, 80-year-old Joanna Cipriano, who had disappeared in 2004 from a village 7 miles away from Praia de Lou. 8-year-old, not 80-year-old, sorry. Praia de Lou had been imprisoned for her murder. Oh no, hang on. God, here we go. The mother and uncle of another missing child, 8-year-old Joanna Cipriano, who had disappeared in 2004 from a village 7 miles from Praia de Lou, had been imprisoned for her murder. Although no body has ever been found, they claimed they had been tortured into confessing. The police maintain that Shrike Cipriano had fallen down the stairs. The officer concerned were cleared, but the jury found that Amaral had falsified statements relating to the torture case. His conviction was upheld in the Supreme Court in March 2011. Joanna's mother is still in jail. See what I mean? I'm telling you, they're all pedophiles, them. A lot of them. They get away with it. That's why they want you out the way. Falsifying statements, it was difficult to understand why anyone would believe the theories of a police officer found guilty of such malpractice. While coordinating the investigation into Madeleine's disappearance, Amaral had been in a Guido. How on earth had he come to be put in charge of an inquiry into the disappearance of another missing child? Ask yourself that again. On the 22nd of May, I had a phone call from our lead investigator. He warned me that a British tabloid would be running a piece in the following day about a convicted paedophile called Raymond Hewlett, who had been staying in Tavera on the Algarve in May 2007. The proximity of Tavera to Praia de Lou and the fact that the man was a paedophile ticked all the boxes for the red top papers, and they jumped on the story. All of a sudden, Hewlett was cast as the man who could have taken Madeleine. We were exasperated. We now knew there had been hundreds of paedophiles on the Algarve at that time, and if, God forbid, one of them had been involved, Hewlett seemed a less likely candidate than a lot of others. He was in his 60s for a start, much older than the men seen by Jane and other witnesses, but to the press that was irrelevant. They had a name and a photograph, and they were off. We were desperate for somebody to investigate Hewlett, not because we thought he had anything to do with taking Madeleine, but because we wanted to eliminate him from the inquiry and quickly put an end to the media speculation. But the UK authorities told us they couldn't help. It's a Portuguese investigation. My main worry was that Hewlett, who had terminal throat cancer, would die before anyone took any official statement from him. Then the media would take the line that it was probably him. Madeleine was dead, game over, and we would be left uphill with an uphill struggle to prevent this theory from becoming established. All the hard work we'd done recently to motivate the public to believe in our search again and to undo the harm being done by Gonzalo Amaral would be ruined. Sometimes it seemed as if we were spent as much time trying to clear the path for our investigation as we did actually investigating. I wasn't sure I had the strength for another battle. It was so frustrating. Sure enough, the tabloid interest in Hewlett raged on until July. In the meantime, he was questioned in connection with a case dating back to 1975, but not by Leicestershire or Portuguese officers. He had also spoke to the tabloids, but refused to see our investigators unless we paid him to do so. He died a few months later. On the 27th of August, we learned that an American girl called J.C. Lee Dugard, abducted in the USA at the age of 11, had been found 18 years after her disappearance. Oh my God. She had been taken by a sex offender and his wife and kept in an outbuilding in their garden. During this time, she had borne her kidnappers 2 daughters. We listened to the news with very mixed emotions. Of course, it was fantastic that JC had been found and reunited with her family, but the appalling circumstances of her captivity and the suffering they had all endured for so long, the precious years cruelly stolen, were heartbreaking. As the hours went by, however, our feelings changed as we realized how much the joy of this reunion, even after 18 horrific years, would outweigh the tragedy for JC and her family. Their experience underlies how children can be hidden for many years and still found alive. This was a positive day, not only for JC, but for Madeleine and all the missing children, wherever they are. We have always said that no matter how long it takes us to find Madeleine and whatever she has to endure, we will get it. We will get it through it. We just desperately need to be given that chance. None of us must give up on these children. In the meantime, we've been caught up by the Byzantine workings of the Portuguese legal system. To date, There have already been 6 separate decisions made in our request for an injunction entailing 4 separate court hearings. The injunction against Samuel's book and DVD was initially rejected on the basis that any damage had already been done. Decision 1. Isabel's appealed on our behalf, and we strongly believe that damage was still being done, both to the search for Madeleine and to our family's human rights. The appeal court agrees that our case should be reconsidered, decision 2. And on the 3rd of September 2009, 4 of our witnesses went to court to testify. 5 days later, the judge granted the injunction and ordered that Sir Amaryl's theories must no longer be repeated. Decision 3. He and his publishers would be required to ensure all unsold copies of the book and that they were removed from shops and warehouses across Europe and deposited with Isabel Duarte or faced daily fines. As expected, Amaryl in return appealed against this decision. Amaryl's appeal were heard in December in Lisbon. Over 5 days that ended up being spread over 3 consecutive months. Jerry and I felt it was important, essential even, for us to attend to represent Madeleine. She needed somebody there for her. She was the victim in this, not him. I also needed to see the whites of Sir Amaryl's eyes. We flew out to Portugal on the 10th of December. Not sure how I feel about seeing him. For the first time ever, I hasten to add, I know I'm not scared, but that man has caused us so much upset and anger because of how he has treated my beautiful Madeleine and the search for her. He deserves to be miserable and feel fear. We were warned of the threat of demonstration against us outside the courtroom, and our Portuguese advisers worried about our welfare and negative publicity. Felt it might be a good idea if we stayed away after all. But if we backed out, the bullies would have won. We've come here for Madeleine, and we have no intention of letting her down. Besides, we couldn't think of anything that could do us or say about us that would be worse than what we've already been suffered. In the event, this demonstration considered of the 2 middle-aged women, friends of Gonzalo's Amaryl. And so it was that on the 11th of December I first laid eyes on Amaryl. It was also the first time he laid eyes on me. It is extraordinary that he could have said and written so many awful things about a person he had never met. He had obviously spruced himself up in recent months. The moustache, gold chain, and bulging tummy familiar to me from unflattering newspaper photographs were nowhere to be seen. Now he was sporting a smart haircut, nice suit and hat, and an intriguing touch, a diamond earring. I wasn't afraid, but I admit that my heart beat a little harder, and I clutched my wooden holding cross tightly as he walked past, flanked by his entourage. Here was the person who had been entrusted with finding our little girl, and who had failed her not simply by being unable to find her when he was in charge, but by then speaking out in a way that in effect hindered other people, ourselves included, from finding her. I couldn't stop staring at him. It was as if I was trying to look inside his head. If the intensity of a stare could penetrate bone, I'm sure I would have managed it. What made this man tick? How did he rationalize his behavior? How did he manage to sleep at night? The other person we got to see that morning was Lewis Nebbs, looking slightly dishevelled and a bit older. We all did, I'm sure. I badly wanted to look this man in the eye too. Since the day I was made a Guida, the last time we'd spoken, he'd accused me of refusing to do so. Today, the tables were turned. However hard I fixed my gaze on him, he would not look at me. We had liked and trusted him, but it felt as if he turned his back on us. I believed he was stronger than that. I thought he was one of the good guys. I was disappointed in him and disappointed in myself too for putting my faith in him. The trial was adjourned until the following month. Amaryl's lawyer's secretary had suspected swine flu, and that meant Amaryl's lawyer had to be quarantined too. We were told still we had come for Madeleine's sake. We had been there and that felt important. We had already decided that we'd take this opportunity to visit Prior Day Lou, so all was not lost. So, what time is it, Al? What time is it? Okay, I'll leave that there because these must be sick to death of listening to me. Girls, I'm sorry I've gone over. Idle spin. Hello, love. Thanks for coming in. How you doing? Are you all right? Do you know what as well? Because she's a Scouser as well, isn't she, Kate? So maybe that's why it came across a bit better. Is it a bit ASMR? I had a boss who was Scouse and he sent me to sleep. What's ASMR? It is a bit. I'm thick with all these little things. You have to tell me. Thanks, Lizzo. What's that? Look at you's giving me the time. I never even noticed. I went right into reading. Do you know when you say I'm so close, I get everything in my brain. I'm looking at a word, right? I can make it out in my brain, but my mouth won't say it, and I'm getting all wound up in my brain. Girl, you don't have to pay me. I'm free. I'm gonna look upstairs tomorrow because we'll be finished that tomorrow. I'm gonna what you say? It sounds that people find pleasing. Oh yeah, I'm made up. What have you been up to, Idle Spin? Oh, thanks for staying, RC. I thought you might have been snoring by now. Oh, I am. I'm really grateful. RC, I've been live all day. I went on with Leanie this morning for 7 hours. And then I went by the house in the car. So we put the live on. We ended up just at the end of the live. There ended up being a fight. So we're trying to get my phone and pull up again and get the camera back out. And we seen all the police coming. So the lives are there. But I've got to wait for Leanie because it was on Leanie's that I went live on the phone in the YouTube app, if you understand. And excuse me, I've got to wait for her to change her, or what is it, a settings, to let them be seen. So can you, you know, the two of them, Pink, are the two of them privated? Astronomers century medicine's response. Oh my God, you've got another 12 hours? Oh my, you don't hardly sleep there, RC, do you? Well, not much. Planning to move soon. One of the, oh, where are you moving, Idle? Where are you moving to? Which live was you in today, Idle? I've got all mixed up. Was it the first one? It was the first one with Pink. Was it with Pink Fan in there? It was, wasn't it? It was the first one. Well, it was after the talk to yous that ended up being major, and I'd done the other live straight away. Gotta go. Thank you. Really a delight to be here. Best wishes. Paul, thank you so much for keeping your words and coming over. Try and get here when Leanie's here. I only read overnight. I've only been doing it this week, but it's much more of a laugh when Leanie's here and we've got all the gang in. We only have 3 or 4 people when I'm reading. So try and get in when Leanie's here. It's mostly our mornings that Leanie's there. So we have a good laugh. Thanks again, Paul, for coming in. Means a lot. Good night and God bless, love. Thanks again. 4 or 5 hours on a regular, Maggie. Oh, I don't know how you cope. That'd be the worst night for me. The worst. My poor dog has been snoring all the way through that. Right. So my poor dog will now be my poor Maggie, because Maggie will be getting woke up all night like having a little baby because she's had loads of sleep. Look at her. Oh, her eyes are like slits. Come here, girl. Come on. Come to your mum. Come here. Come on. Come here. Now all she wants is a biscuit before she goes to bed. Southport! Oh, going to Southport. Very nice. I've got relatives that live up there. Might bump into you, Paul. You can have my autograph when I see you. Oh, go on, Paul. Good night, mate. Thanks for coming in, love. God bless. See you soon. Oh, he's a nice man, isn't he? Eh? Only met him today. Oh, see, in a live. See, you get loads of people popping up, don't you, when you go on a live in YouTube? I don't understand that. Can anyone explain it to me? Why people pop up on a live in YouTube, but if you do it through StreamYard, it's just the regulars. I don't understand it. Do you understand that, Pink? Or you, Liz? I'm just trying to see who's been. It's only being used, isn't it? Oh, I used to read for a living, sort of. Oh, go away, idle. Oh my God. Used to, so we used to read. Oh, pink fan, description above. Let's see. What did I ask? I forgot. Hang on. Let's see. Let's have a look. I'm scrolling up. Oh, this is moving too fast again. Goes too fast. Can't do it slow. Can't do it too slow. I can't do it. So, hang on. Pop-up lives just come up in Liverpool stream. Why? How come? Even though I was on Leanie's. Description above. Whereabouts is the description? YouTube lives just pop up in the live tab. So like when sometimes of a morning, if I click live to see what's going on, you just see lives. I get that, yeah. But what do you mean when it says they come up in Liverpool stream? I wasn't on Liverpool YouTube. I was on Leanie's. God bless you, Alec. I don't understand it, Liz, to you. I haven't got a clue. But Leanie said when you go live on your phone, you get loads of new people coming in. Now, on the first live, when Pink was on today with me, that lad's Idle Spin came on then. But you know, on the second live, it was all new people. And there was Sab came in. He was the only one who knew was Sab. And I thought, here we go. Here we go. I'm going to get trolled to death now. And I haven't got a mod to my name. But they were all okay. They were fine. Oh, I get you. That was supposed to be live, not Liverpool. Mine does it all the time, Pink. Does it all the time. Well, girls, listen, I'm going to let you go. And I just want to thank you so much for staying with me again. And you, RC, you know, you haven't even been there since the beginning, and it must be hard to like catch up with what's gone on and that. But I'm just going to check now to see how many pages. It'll definitely be God, I don't know. Be over tomorrow. Oh, these might be pictures. Hold on. I'll see how more I've got left. Hold on. Hang on, guys. So we've got, oh God, we should finish it tomorrow. I will hold my breath like. The hell, I thought it'd be less than that. But I think we might, if we're lucky, finish it tomorrow. And then make go on Joseph Fritzl. See, oh, then that's going to be all foreign as well, isn't it? And I won't be able to do another thing about that either. YouTube, not StreamYard, Maggie, pop-up live seem to generate more views. I know. How mad is that? Pink means if you go, Martin got 52, but yeah. See what I mean? 5.2k. So it's best to go live. So I'm thinking, I wish I'd known that. I wish I could be, I didn't have Lainey's YouTube then. I only got that this morning. If it's about that, when we've had lovely days, I'd have been out and about. I'd have sat down Southport on the beach. I'd have had a ball. Lainey did when she went live in the garden, but you get all kinds of trolls, yeah. That's it. Oh, listen, yous go. Don't let me keep yous, because I know yous have got to go on mod, haven't yous? God, yous are going to be knackered. Going to be knackered, girls. Thanks very much. Thank yous for being there, Pink. And I'll speak to yous in the morning if Lainey's live. I don't know whether she's going to be, but if she is, I'll be there anyway at some point. Thanks a lot. Yous go, girls. Don't let me hold you here. Thanks so much. Thanks, Pink. And thanks, Lizzo. Love yous all the world. Yous are really good to stay with me. I mean that. I do appreciate it. Aren't you, isn't Martin on? Aren't you going to Martin's? I thought Martin was going to be on. Maybe I'm wrong, Gail. Don't you mod for Martin? I thought you modded for Martin. Ta-ra, Liz. Have a good night, Gail. Give me love to Beth as well. Say hello to her from me and Alec. Good night, love. Good night, Pink. Love ya. Oh, go and get your head down, Pink. Be up in the morning with the baby. Good night, Gail. Speak to you tomorrow. Really appreciate it, as ever. Good night and God bless. Oh, maybe I've got it wrong. Maybe I've got it wrong, Pink. I don't know. Oh, maybe I've got it wrong then, Liz. I thought I'd seen, because I went on before and was looking, and I thought I'd seen that Martin was going to be live. So maybe I've got it wrong, as usual. All right, girls. Speak to you. That's why I wanted just to go, because I thought, oh, I don't want to keep you. I got a bit worried, because I wouldn't do something like that, Meg. You know what I mean? But okay, love. You have a good night anyway. Go and get a cuppa or whatever. Get your head down. And don't forget, Liz, say hello to Beth for us. Good night and God bless, Gail. And RC, the same to you, love. Good night and God bless. Have a good day. And a good night as well. And RC, if you're in Leanie's in the morning. Was you there? You were there this morning, wasn't you? Do you know what? Today's been a blur to me. I've been live that much, I can't keep up. Good night and God bless everyone. Good night.